2, 1, go.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Laura Ehrlich, and our guest tonight is Crystal Maldonado. Excuse me. Before I introduce Crystal, thank you all for tuning in, and please chat with us during the interview. Your comments will appear in our broadcast studio, and we will weave them into our conversation. If you enjoy this episode, as always, please consider becoming a patron or patroness to help keep the podcast going. You can find information on writermothermonster.com. And if you didn't realize, this is a live show pretty much every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and the show will be archived after the fact as an audio file and video. So you can watch this interview at your leisure or join us tonight. Now I'm excited to introduce Crystal. Crystal Maldonado is a young adult author with a lot of feelings. Her debut novel, Fat Chance Charlie Vega, is a 2021 New England Book Award winner, a Cosmopolitan Best New Book, and a Pop Sugar Best New YA novel. Her next novel, No Filter and Other Lies, explores teenage life in the social media age and the lies we tell to ourselves and others. By day, Crystal works in higher ed marketing, and by night, a writer who loves Beyonce, shopping, spending too much time on her phone, and being extra. Her work has also been published in Latina, BuzzFeed, and the Hartford Courant, and she lives in Western Massachusetts with her husband and 2.5-year-old daughter. She describes writer motherhood in 3 words as chaotic, emotional, sparkly. Now, please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Hi. Oh my God. Sparkly. I just wanted to be hopefully the first person who has used that as an adjective.
I think you were. Hello, it's so nice to see you. And you and I met at the Connecticut Lit Fest, where we were on a panel together talking about your book. I'm going to hold it up, Fat Chance Charlie Vega, which is an amazing read for anyone who hasn't read it. Pick it up. Yeah. But yes, sparkly, which if anyone's listening after the fact, check out the YouTube video as well to check out Crystal's background, because it's definitely sparkly. So tell us why motherhood is sparkly.
So I wanted to include that for a couple reasons. So one, I just love glitter in general. And so now having a reason to love glitter and to have glittery things, because I have a little girl. And honestly, if I had a little boy, I would be doing the same thing. I'd be like, let's put glitter on everything. And you realize just how much that saying about how you find glitter for the rest of your life once you use it once is true. And I had forgotten how true that was, I feel like. And so I feel like that encompasses parenthood is sparkliness, but then there's also the metaphorical sparkliness that's just these sweet little moments, right? Where you're going through things that are exhausting, but then there is something sparkly and it's shiny and it's warm and fuzzy and you feel really good. And so I don't know, it's just shiny and happy is, I think, some of it. And it only feels that way because you're dealing with the garbage also. You know what I mean? You have to have both.
I know exactly what you mean. And maybe that goes into your other word, chaotic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Total chaos, right? You're just running all over the place. You're juggling everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're hoping you're not dropping things. You're like, did I eat? Did the baby eat? Did the dog eat? Why am I thinking about food so much suddenly? It's all these things. And I feel like you're just hoping for the best once you become a parent, and you're also trying to still be a full person and nourish your interests and nourish your creativity. It's really hard. And so it is a lot of chaos and just trying, right? I don't know if that's your experience, but
oh my gosh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the description of running around wondering if everyone is eaten, because usually there is somebody who's hungry, and that just sums it up so beautifully. Yeah.
If I make it through a day where I'm like, okay, fed Maya, fed myself, my husband's eaten, and the dog, Obi, has eaten, like that's a good day. So
Yeah, absolutely. Is Maya at the point yet? So she's 2.5. Can she get her own snacks and open them and eat them, or is that still a little ways
we're
off?
still working on it. So there's some she can do better than others. So like a banana, she's becoming really good at. Once I start it, she can sort of peel it. But then it's all over the place. She seems like she can manage to get like goldfish and fruit snacks open miraculously, but like if it's a fruit or a vegetable, she's like, mama, I can't. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that sounds
I'm
about
on
right.
to you.
I know. I feel like, so my daughter's 5 and she can now go and open the snack drawer and like get her snacks. And I try to keep, like the good snacks in there, like
Yeah.
relatively healthy, but she can also access the not healthy snacks. And so sometimes if I leave her alone for a little while and like try to fold clothes or something, I come back and she's like eating, I don't know, some sort of garbage. And I'm just
Right, like cookie Oreos. It's like
yes,
9 a.m. and she's like, hey.
okay, whatever.
Oh, I
So
feel ya.
self-sufficiency is a double-edged sword, I think.
I think so too. It's
Yeah.
great to not have to be the hands for a little person, but also you get what you get, right? Like
Exactly. Like, all right, I guess you're full. If you are full of Oreos, at least you're
that's
full.
fine.
Like, whatever.
Sometimes Oreos are my dinner too. I get it.
Yeah, totally. Now, I think the third word you used, while it may seem pretty straightforward, tell us about emotional. Was it emotion or emotional? I'm going to
Emotional.
emotional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you got it. So in the intro that you read, like I said, I'm a writer with a lot of feelings. And I just in general, even before I was a mom, I had all of these feelings bottled up inside all the time. And I always felt like they were just bursting to like at the seams, like they were going to come out. And interestingly, I feel like motherhood made me more okay showing those emotions and being okay with the fact that like, oh, I'm a crier and now I listen to people talking about things and I'm welling up and like I'm in a meeting with my boss but I'm crying because it was just like really emotional, And so I feel like that is parenthood. Like you're just the emotions are big and like they talk about big emotions with toddlers, but I think there's also big emotions as parents and like
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much of parenting is kind of like learning to parent your inner child. I know that sounds weird, but like you're thinking about how were things when I was little and how did we do things and how do I want to do things differently or better or whatever. And so it's a lot of like internal reckoning where you're like, wait, that bothers me because when I was a kid, XYZ happened, or wait, that's important to me because it was important to me as a kid. And so there's so many emotions nobody tells you about.
Yes, yeah. People talk about how like the first couple weeks are hard. So you're like, okay, I'm going to be emotional because like everything's out of whack or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the emotions just get stronger and stronger and
They do.
stronger.
Like you put it perfectly. Like I thought like, okay, yeah, the first month or so, like I'll be in my feelings. Oh my God. It's also everything that comes after that and before that. Like your pregnancy, you're all over the place. Like it's a lot of emotions. You got to figure out how to handle them. And then, you're like, you want to be this person that's like, oh, I'm vulnerable and I'm showing my kid how to be emotionally healthy and like nourish those feelings. But also sometimes you're like, oh, I just want to scream myself.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a lot.
Yeah, no, I love that we are talking about that because I'm not sure it's come up on the show before, like the strength of emotions and how we're the inner child and how we grapple with emotions that change and expand as our kids grow with their own emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's such a big part of parenting. And I think it's I think it's more a part of parenting now than it was probably like a couple of generations ago. But this whole idea of like, oh yeah, you're the adult and like so you have to have your emotions in check, but also you're just a human. And so sometimes your emotions are very much not in check, right? Or like you reacted poorly to something and now you have to figure out how to say you're sorry to your 2-year-old because you're like, yeah, it was just water. Like, I'm sorry. And I shouldn't have gotten upset about that. It's just, this work is really hard. And like, they don't understand that. So you have to like be like ultra compassionate. And it is, I think, this like beautiful lesson, but oh so hard some days when you're like, my kid's having a tantrum, but I want to have the tantrum because I had the long day too.
But you know, I found, and just looking back to when my daughter was 2.5 or 3, and yeah, and there were moments when you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't responded in that way or whatever. But I feel like when you talk about with them at the time, like, oh, I'm so sorry that I snapped at you or that this happened or whatever, it sinks in, and then they bring it back to you a year later. They'll see you upset or something and they'll comfort you and be like, oh mama, it's okay, remember when this happened and you told me X, and like and then they parrot it back to you.
Yeah. Oh, see, you even just saying that is making me a little like emotional and misty because I've only, so like we've said, Maya's 2.5 and we've started to see that. Like, so me and my husband will see it in these like tiny unexpected moments, right? Where maybe I drop something and I'm like, oh man. And she, like the other day, I was cooking and, I spilled a little bit of tomato sauce on my shirt and I was like, oh, I got it all over myself. And she touched my arm and was like, Mama, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And I wanted to cry in the best way because that's what you hope for. Like, you hope you're raising this human who is like empathetic and kind. And so that when they show that to you, it's just like, oh, wow, you're this incredible person. And also I had something to do with that. And that's kind of beautiful too.
Yeah, you modeled it to them, and they even if they don't seem like they're picking it up because they're in the middle of throwing books across the room or something, like, like 6 months from now they'll repeat something back to you and it'll be like, oh, they recognized, or it sank in, like how I dealt with that, and now they're learning how to deal with my emotions.
Exactly. It's a give and take.
Exactly. Yeah, we're learning along with them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me more about, so as a fellow woman who had and still has big emotions and like journaled about it and like all this stuff, tell me about writing YA and how, first of all, like having grown up as a person with big emotions plays into writing YA, but then like how this reckoning with emotion through motherhood is feeding into your work also.
Oh, I love this question. So I feel like why I gravitated towards YA as a genre is because of all the feelings and all of the emotions and just those like experiences and what it's like being when you're a teen, everything is dialed up to 100, right? Like every single thing is either the best thing ever or it's gonna end your life. And I relate to that. Like I get it. And I remember so vividly being in that headspace. And yeah, of course you get better at like regulating your emotions and knowing, okay, this isn't the end of the world. But I think there's something kind of just kind of like beautiful about that rawness in those feelings. And it's almost like a grown version of a toddler, right? There's like, you lose that filter a little bit when you're a teen, I think. And you're just like, like suddenly you're feeling everything at a million watts, and it hurts or it's amazing and it feels so good. And so I just love being able to explore those feelings through these characters. And also, I think, like, pay tribute to that, right? Because I think that teenagers, God, they get such like a raw deal, right? So they're growing up and we expect them to like listen and behave and do their homework and do XYZ. And also, we want them to like express themselves and to be responsible, but also they have no autonomy most of the time, right? Like they're living at home and they get no say over anything. And God, that's hard. And I think we forget how hard that is as we get older. And I just like, I don't know, I want to like pay tribute to all of these teenagers out there who are doing their best, who I really think are super smart and super empathetic. And like, God, this generation is like better than I ever thought I would be. So like, I have such, I think, an admiration for that time in our lives, not just because it's difficult, but because it's also so special. And there's so much like in the friendships we develop and the relationships we develop and the way we sort of figure out who we are and like who we want to be. And we try on these identities. There's a lot there. And I think through YA, you can kind of explore it a little more than you can in like adult or literary writing or middle grade, at least for me. And maybe that's just because I'm stuck in my emotions all the time, which is fine too. Well, and then going into like motherhood, it's I feel like you come at it thinking about characters and emotions and experiences in such a new way. So you like, I want to write things that if my kid reads it someday, they feel connected, they feel seen, or they feel kind of heard. And it's funny because when I started Fat Chance Charlie Vega, I didn't even want to be a parent. Like I was not ever going to have kids. Like that was not for us. And then over the span of it, my husband and I started spending time with a friend. She had just had a baby and we fell totally head over heels. And we were like, oh, we need to have a baby. Just one, but we need to have one. And now I feel like it plays so much into my writing and thinking about it. And so I feel like before I was thinking about just teenagers of the future, not necessarily mine, but and so I was keeping them in mind. But now there's such like the personal element of like, oh, well, if Maya reads this someday, what's she gonna think and what's she gonna take away from it too, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have so many questions.
Okay, sorry, I know I just rambled.
No. It was that was perfect, and it just sparked a lot of different directions.
Yes,
I'm trying to think of which one to go first. Let's see. Do you miss that heightened emotion? Because I'll say I do. I feel like when you become an adult, your emotions level out a little bit, and I miss that like the height of like the highs and the like deep lows of feeling, you know, and it's hard to get that back. Do you miss it?
I'm actually glad I've never been asked that before, but I really do miss it. And I'm also glad you kind of relate to that. Like there's just something so nice about like succumbing to the feelings and just letting it kind of be, versus when you're an adult, like, yeah, of course you have these like beautiful moments and these moments of wonder, but I don't think I appreciated them as much until I had a kid, because suddenly I was seeing everything through her eyes, right? Like the first snowfall, or how cool it is to look up into a Christmas tree and there's all these twinkling lights. You're like, wait, that is really cool. And I did not know that. And so I miss those like I think the leisurely way about our lives, right? Like when you're a teen, it's like you go to school, but then there's all these hours in school and after school where you just get to kind of you be with your friends, you get to be yourself, you listen to music. And as an adult, we're so rushing from like one place to another. I feel like we don't want to feel a thing. We're like, give me TV and my phone and a book so I don't feel anything.
I think you're right. And yes, that really does resonate with me. And it's part of why I love YA, because, and particularly Fat Chance Charlie Vega, because you can get back into that headspace in a way that's like, I think that's maybe why a lot of adults read YA, right? Because you can get back there a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's like, well, actually, so we had talked briefly about maybe I'll read a little bit. So
Yeah.
can I just read from the first page? I
Yes.
feel like we dive right into this intense yearning that Charlie has. And I feel like this is, I think, getting to like the heart of what we're talking about, of that, just like the big feelings. So,
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to solo you here on the screen and then take it away and read as much as you'd like.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is from chapter 1. I imagine being kissed about 100 times a day. The tense moment just before the kiss, when they look right at me like there's no one else in the room. The way they caress my cheek, maybe put their hand on the small of my back. To be so close to someone I care about, someone I like, or maybe even love. Feeling the warmth of their skin near mine would be magic. They smell good, and I can almost feel their lips on mine even before they're there. And then they are, soft and gentle, and I forget who I am, just for a second. I forget everything else. I forget that I don't always have the right thing to say. I forget about comparing myself to my best friend. I forget about the issues with my mom. I forget how badly I wish I were a size 2. I forget it all, except for that kiss. And it's not so much the who, it's more about the what. The kiss, a kiss, to be kissed. It's the stuff my dreams are made of. So, this is really like the intro to who Charlie is as a person. And you can feel the yearning. And I remember being that like in my head and the daydreaming, right? Where you're just, oh, what if that boy looked at me, or that girl is so cute, or whatever it is, you
Yeah.
know?
I know. Yeah. Nope. I think that page draws you right in. And have you heard from both adults and young people who've read the book? What
I
kind of
have.
response are you getting?
Yeah, it's been really nice. So, okay, so also fellow pandemic author, like it's hard. You take like the audiences are whoever. You're like, please, just anybody talk to me. Is anybody out there?
Yeah.
So I would say at the start of like when my book first released, I actually was hearing mostly from adults who were reading it and connecting with Charlie, and just like could relate to this journey of being someone who is fat and trying to like love themselves and really work on themselves and talk about body positivity and things like that. And that was really magical, because what I heard was from a lot of people was like, oh, I wish I read this when I was a teenager. And that's like exactly why I wrote it, right? Like I wrote the book that I hoped that I could have read when I was a teenager. So that was like the ultimate compliment. And then more recently, I've started to hear from like actual teenagers, which is the dream, who are feeling similarly and who are, dealing with some of these pressures of like, well, how do I reconcile how I feel about my body versus how I like what I see on Instagram versus my friend's body, and like what does that all look like, and how do I gain confidence and like come into my own when I'm only 16 or I'm only 15 and I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's been really, really lovely to just hear from people who they really wanted to see like a fat character fall in love and get to be the one who is yearned after, right? Like we meet, I mean, spoiler, we meet Brian and he's like, Charlie, you so cute. And like, and we didn't like, as a fat girl, like I have not read many things or watched many things where the fat girl is like the cutie, the one who is like, oh, she's adorable and we love her. And here's why. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have Charlie be that heroine.
Yeah, and she's charming and funny and smart and like confident, although she has big emotions and all the like, the insecurities of her age and her,
Yeah.
but she's self-assured in many ways, and she knows who she is, and she's a fabulous heroine. Tell me why it was so important. I mean, you just did a little bit, but let's draw out a little bit more about having a fat character and why that's so vital and what you hope Maya might get from that someday.
Yeah. So I honestly felt like I spent so much of my youth just like wishing that I was different. And so, like Charlie, I spent a lot of my birthday wishes when you blow on your candle and I would wish, like, oh, please let this be the year that I get skinny and I can finally start living my life. Because that was the kind of thing you would hear. It's like, you're not going to start living until you're actually thin, or you can't do XYZ until you lose 20 pounds or whatever. And obviously that's super damaging, I think, for anybody to get that message. I think regardless of what your body looks like, women especially, but also like non-binary folks, trans folks, like men, like we all get this message that our bodies are wrong. And that is impossible to deal with when you have no choice but to exist in a body. And so, and it's not always just that, oh, I'm fat or oh, I'm this. It's like every person has a thing that they feel insecure about. And so for Charlie, it's her size. And I wanted to really dive into that. Like, what is it like existing as a 16-year-old who's fat and who can't shop at stores with her friends? Like, what is that like? And what about, like, so there's this scene where she's kind of, she's in the high school gym and she's looking for a place to sit. And we get some of the thoughts in her head where she's thinking, okay, so there's a seat up there, but that means I have to climb over these people. And I say, excuse me. And what if I bump into them? And so these are like very real things that I think people who have fat bodies experience, but they don't always get to see those things reflected in any kind of media with like kindness or like delicacy. Like, I think a lot of times it's for the laughs, right? Like, it's like, oh, you're fat and you like don't fit into that chair, when really it is mortifying. And like you're like, oh my God, can the earth swallow me whole? Because I'd rather that happen than have to admit to my best friend that I don't fit into any clothes into the store. So it's like this experience that I think a lot of fat folks deal with, but they deal with it kind of like in a vacuum. Nobody wants to talk about it because it feels very shameful. And so I wanted to kind of put that on the page and hopefully make people who experience that know that they're not the only ones going through that, right? Yeah. But then also, like, if you're not fat, I think, or I hope that Charlie feels enough like a friend that you go through this journey with her and you're like, oh my God, I never would have known that that was a problem. But now I want to be aware for any friends who are fat, and I want to like make space for them and make sure I am doing things that are inclusive.
Yeah, because the way she carries herself, her friends don't realize that she has these insecurities, right? Because she's so appears on the outside, so confident and so beautiful. And like she knows how to work with what she's got. And like,
yes.
I would love, tell me if you'd rather read a different section, but there's the part where she buys this dress and she's looking at herself in the mirror.
Oh, the mirror. Okay, let me see where I can find that one. Okay. So actually, fun kind of fact about this, so Charlie originally, so she's dancing in this scene, and the original song that I had her kind of like dancing along to was Rihanna, and because I love Rihanna. And one of the comments that I got from my editor was that Rihanna is too old and like young people don't know her as a singer anymore. And I crushed me. I was like, wait, no, not Rihanna. And she was like, well, she's like a fashion beauty person now to most people. And I was like, I guess you're correct. And so we had to change the reference. But it just killed me. Yeah.
Oh my God. Doesn't that just like, oh, I have that moment because a lot of the people, this is a tangent, but a lot of my staff at work are in their like very early 30s or like mid 20s. Mm-hmm. And I'll make a reference to something and they'll look at me blankly. I'll be like, but like, you don't know who like David Bowie is or like somebody. And then I feel about 1 million years old. So yeah.
Like, well, I'm 100. So
I'm 100.
You might as well.
May as
All right, so
well.
I
All right.
found it. So this is
Here we
chapter
go.
10. Okay, so if trying on your dress a million times is wrong, then I don't want to be right. I just need to make sure that I look okay. Good, even. If I'm going to pull off being Cal Carter's date to the dance, I need to feel and act the part. So if that means slipping into my dress, turning on a little music, and modeling in the mirror, that's fine, right? And with Brian's less than reassuring response to my news, I just need to remind myself that this is really happening. But something about this Spice Girls song, yes, I'm totally listening to the Lovesick playlist that I recommended to Amelia, gets me so hyped that eventually I'm not really trying on my dress so much as straight up singing and dancing in the mirror. Just as I'm belting out the chorus, the door to my room swings open and there's my mother. Mom! I grab my phone and fumble with it, trying to pause the music. Don't you knock? She's laughing when I finally get the song to stop playing. I wanted to use your mirror and I didn't think you'd mind a quick interruption to your concert. You know I prefer the lighting in here. She motions at me. What's all this? Nothing. I'm just singing, I say. But I know there's really no way out of this one. In a new dress, she asks. I sigh. Well, what? I sigh again. It's for the dance. The dance, she repeats. Then her face lights up. The George Washington High School Annual Football Award Ceremony? That'd be the one, I say. Oh my God, she exclaims. But you? I feel my jaw clench a little. Really, Mom? You? She rolls her eyes at me. Oh, Charlie, that's not what I meant, she says. I'm just surprised. Yeah, I can tell. But why? I press. It's just that not everyone gets to go, so of course I'm surprised. Happy, but surprised. It's so surprising that someone would want to go with me, I ask. You know what? Don't start. Mom puts her hand up as if to physically block any other words that might come out of my mouth. So this is really, I feel like, encapsulates the roller coaster of being a teenager, right? Like she is on the highest level of confidence. She's like, I'm cute. Look at me. Look at the mirror. And then her mom comes in and is like, you're going to the dance. And she's just like, oh, moment over.
Oh my God. I said this to you during the Connecticut Lit Fest, but I wanted to punch her mom so badly, like all the way through the book, which is not to say that she's a stock villain because she is not. She has complexity and nuance, but in that moment, oh my gosh.
I wouldn't have blamed you one bit. And like, that's so I'm actually like, thank you for saying that because I really was trying to make this mother-daughter relationship that was really complicated because I think a lot of us can relate to that first. And I know I can relate. And I know that like friends of mine, I've seen these sort of play out where it's not all bad, but it's also not all good. And so there are moments where it's like that, where it's very infuriating. And her mom is like trying to joke, but not really joking. She's being hurtful and she's saying things that she thinks are funny, but like no one else thinks are funny. And so I wanted to show that sometimes the people who love us can also hurt us. And that's not okay. And we have some of Charlie's friends in the book be like, Charlie, you know, that's not cool, right? Like she shouldn't say those things to you. But there's also this element of like, they do have fun together sometimes. And there are moments where they really connect and they click and it feels good. And I just think that's so much more realistic to what life is like, is sometimes you have people in your life who you love, but you don't always like, right? That is so freaking messy. And especially when you're a teenager, like you might not like your parents, even if you love them, but like, what does that look like if you're living with them? And like, that's it. That's who you have. How do you deal with that? You know?
Yeah, no, it's so, it's complicated. And I thought about it, or I'm thinking about it right now. I'm not sure I thought this when I was reading it because I was so invested in Charlie and her story.
Yeah.
But now that we're talking about motherhood, I'm thinking about the mother and her story. And excuse me, I don't think it ruins anything that she went on her own journey of weight loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking now about mothers trying to do the best for their children and making mistakes and learning along with their daughters,
Yeah.
that like she clearly had her own struggles and her own emotional baggage and didn't want
Absolutely.
Charlie to have the same experience she'd had. And it comes out in ways that she probably didn't intend to be hurtful, but ended up being really hurtful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It makes me think back to the beginning of our conversation about when your toddler's having a tantrum and you snap at them and you're like, oh, I handled that really badly.
Yes. Right. Because I think we do. I mean, Charlie doesn't usually get like an over the top apology from her mom, but she does get these moments where it's like, oh, her mom is cooking her favorite food or is trying to show her that she's sorry or she is thinking about her or cares for her. But it's hard because it doesn't erase what was said. It doesn't erase what happened. Right. But I do think, like, as infuriating as her mom is, there's also this element of like, yeah, she's human and like she clearly is going through something, like the loss of her husband and the grief, I think, of that was so overwhelming. And she is also not immune to these messages from society about losing weight and being smaller. And I just like to think of her and Charlie as like these foils where they both got the same messages, but her mom took it one way and was like, oh, I've got to do these weight loss shakes and like sell them to other women so that they can live their best life. And Charlie's like, oh no, I think everyone is beautiful as they are. And really the tough thing is just figuring out how to apply that to me. And like, how do I feel better in my skin? And how do I feel good about myself? And so, it's complicated. But I wanted to have in there, like, I wanted it to be clear, like the way Charlie's mom talks to her is not okay. And like, so even though I want people to feel like if they have a relationship like that, I want them to feel like, oh yeah, there are complicated other people out there who have tough relationships with their mom or their family or whoever. But I also want them to know, and I think Charlie realizes this, that it's not okay, right? Like you have to draw the boundaries and be like, Mom, I'm not going to talk about that with you or whatever it is.
Yeah, it is not okay that she comes in and mocks her in her dress when she feels good.
No.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Nobody should do that to anybody, right? Like, oh.
You know, something that I find really fascinating as we're talking about it is the way you use social media in the book. And I know you're a social media manager at your work, but like we get a lot of messages, negative messages from social media about what our bodies should look like and what we should be as women. But Charlie also finds some places within social media that are empowering to her.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about social media and how you drew like social and cultural messages into the book in that way.
Yeah, so I feel like social media does get kind of a bad rap, and I work in it full time. I know it can be totally draining and incredibly exhausting. I fully agree, but I also know that because of social media and the internet, like that's how I found community. And it's especially how I started to find the fat acceptance movement and to find other fat people who were like, just like, I just like clothes and I want to look super cute and I want to share a picture of myself. Is that okay? Because like, I want to say like the 2000s, right? Like that was not a thing. Like fat people did not get to go and be like, I'm cute and I'm adorable. Like we had TV shows like The Biggest Loser and Extreme Makeover and all of these. We had like, I mean, no shade, but we had like Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton and all of these really, really thin celebrities. And so the idea was like, be as small as possible, take up as little space as you can. Mm-hmm. And so I remember, so this is going to date myself, but back in the live journal days,
I was right there with you. It's okay.
I don't remember how, but I stumbled on this community called Fashionista, and it was truly just fat people showing off their cute little outfits and then telling each other where they found the clothes, because then the internet was not as robust as it is now, and it was actually really hard to find like a Torrid. Like Torrid didn't even exist. It was like Fashion Bug and Lane Bryant, and like it was hard to find these clothes. And so it really was like a resource where it's like, oh, you like my top? I got it at this store in such and such location. And so that really opened up a whole world for me as like, oh my God, these are people who are okay with their bodies. And like, I think that person looks amazing and their body looks like mine. So could my body look okay too? And so it was like, my mind was blown. And so I think that was the start of like my love and appreciation for social media as like a catalyst for creating communities for people who have a hard time finding them in real life, right? And so we see that with these like bigger movements like the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, but also in these smaller things where it's like, I just want to see bodies like myself, or I just really have a passion for something. And now all of a sudden you have access to people who have those same passions or those same interests. And so for Charlie, like, she is able to kind of curate her Instagram feed a little bit and find people who give her actual outfit inspiration, right? So instead of like looking at how these outfits look on these thin bodies, she can see it on bodies that look like hers and think, oh, wait, I can pull that off. I can totally pull that off. And so I think that it's possible to have positive interactions on social media. It's just hard and it takes work. Like, you have to curate it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is that your experience too? Like, it's just hard.
It is hard. Well, because the most prevalent messages are usually the negative ones. And thinking about motherhood too, it's like there's the whole I don't know what to call it, but the sort of showmanship of motherhood on Instagram, you know, with like all like these women have like white furniture and babies, and I'm like, what? That's not realistic. And then you look at it and you're like, well, my life doesn't look like that. I must be a mess, and they must, like, most mothers must have it together. But yeah, if you go looking, you find those like smaller pockets of people who are real and like, you know.
Like you. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because there really is, I feel like it's unhealthy the way motherhood is portrayed on a lot of social media. Like, oh my God, everything I do is wrong according to these communities and these people. And it's like, oh no, I don't have neutral toys that are made of wood. Like, I've got the plastic thing that's singing. We've got Cocomelon on. Like, I'm the worst mom. But then you talk to other parents and who are like, oh God, yeah, of course we do the Cocomelon. Like, that's all this kid wants, or whatever it is. Yeah. And it's really hard when you are bombarded though by these messages, and it's so funny how it happens no matter what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But I think motherhood, especially, like, it's just an easy way for people to kind of feel good about themselves. So it's easy to be like, oh, well, I would never not breastfeed my child until they were 7. And you're like, but I had milk supply issues, and like, I promise I didn't mean anything. And I know. Yeah. It's exhausting.
Oh, I know. And the kids look perfect. Like, my daughter will not let me touch her hair. So, and she has like curly hair. So it's like this all the time.
Oh, and that's going to be Maya. I'm glad you said that.
Because it's amazing. And it's fine. But like, my husband describes her to me, not to her, as like, she looks like someone who crawled out of a gutter. Like, she's like,
oh my God.
Yes, so funny. It's funny. And I'm like, oh, and I'm totally the mom who is like standing at the bus stop in my slippers, in my like thing. And if you don't see other real people, but only like social media, which during a pandemic is usually what you see, it can feel so isolating and like you're doing everything wrong.
I know. And like I feel like the best thing to do in those situations is truly like mute, unfollow, just say goodbye. Because if you're like me, you can really fall into these like these hate spirals, or like the depression scrolling, or doom scrolling as they call it, where you're angry, you're upset, you feel inadequate, but you can't stop yourself, and you're just like going through, you're like, oh, look at that. And they have the snoo. How do they afford the snoo that costs $1,200? It just,
oh yeah.
It's so wild. So I mean, if you're watching and experiencing any of those feelings on social media, do not feel bad about muting them, saying goodbye, deleting the app off your phone, whatever you got to do.
Oh yeah, totally. And then when you're ready to go back and find the community that will lift you up instead of like smush you down because your kid's hair is like,
Yeah.
Swamp
All
Thing.
over the place.
But tell me a little bit more. So let's see. There's so many directions I want to go. So you said that you never thought that you would become a mother. I feel like we have so much in common here. I never also wanted to be a mother.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. My husband and I were married for 5 or 6 years, I think, before we finally were like, okay, maybe we can have a child. And like you, it's like sort of being around other people who have babies, and you're like, oh, they still have jobs and they still like have passions, and they're not just a parent. And that was my biggest fear, is being like just a mom. Not that motherhood is
no, it's beautiful, it's incredible. Moms, oh my God, and dads, parents, you're all doing amazing. But I feel like I had a lot of the same thoughts too, where it was like, I don't know, I just like, I have all these things I want to do, and I want to travel, and I want to just try new things. And I didn't know if I could do all of that while also being a parent. And I also think like, if you had any experience like growing up where you maybe had a hard time with any family members, sometimes it feels like, oh my God, what if I become that person or whatever? And like, in order to break the cycle, maybe I just need to not reproduce, or I need to not like engage. And so I worried about that for a long time. And then it was like truly being around a sweet little baby where I was like, oh no, I need one. I need to make a person, and I can actually like right a lot of the wrongs and make a good human, right? And I think that that's the important part, is thinking about it not just as like a baby, but like, do you want to have a little person that you get to teach how to do stuff, and like you get to hang out with them and like have fun and be silly, and also like get annoyed at each other too, because that's part of it, but you get to like go have adventures. Like, do you want that? Because that's what I want. And so that's kind of how my husband and I came to it. We were like, I don't know, this is kind of good. You want to add another person and like hang out with them all the time?
Well, yeah, and there's that fear that you're going to replicate what came before, and that is what family looks like. But the most helpful thing someone told me was that, like, although I had a very nice childhood and family experience, so like there was no badness there, but it's like, yes, but I can be a different kind of parent, and I can go on adventures, and I can, write novels and have a child, and they can be part of all of that, right?
Absolutely. And I think it plays into the not falling into the trap of like being the social media mom and feeling like you need to sort of have it all, right? Like there's this myth, and I don't know if you watched 30 Rock back in the day, but I so vividly remember Liz Lemon, where she's like, there's this scene where she's like eating a sandwich and she's a total mess, and she's like, I can have it all. But it's like, clearly she can't, because none of us can, because that's not real.
Yep.
And like, what is having it all? It's like, you have to, I think, recondition your brain to think about, oh, well, what matters to me, right? And I don't need to, like, maybe I don't care as much about having a pristine house. Maybe I care more about reading a bedtime story and then going to write, right? Like tucking my kid in and then being like, okay, peace, I'm going to go watch You on Netflix and go be a lump, or whatever it is. Like, you just have to find what works really well for you. And there's, I think, great freedom in that realization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wonder how many women don't get to have that realization or that freedom because they're so, I don't know, because they don't have the support or the partner who encourages them to do that. Or it sounds like your partner is very supportive and encouraging and like is on the same page. So. And mine is too. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I could have done the author thing, if I didn't have someone who was like, oh no, we're equals here and we are partners and like coming together and we're both raising this tiny human. And so like, we're going to switch off sleep schedules where it's like you get 5 hours and then I get 5 hours or whatever it is, like whatever works for the person. But and that's the thing is like I feel like it's a good idea to always shout out like the people who make things possible, because it's so easy. At least for me, like when I'm on social media, I'm like, how are they doing all that? That's so exhausting. Like, how do you work and do this and do that? But like when we give credit to like, oh no, actually my kid's in daycare, or and I have a really supportive partner, or I don't know, we won the lotto and so we don't have to worry about money. So we can do whatever we want. Like that's important, because I think it helps creatives who are like, we're already fragile, but like then we get on ourselves where we're like, how come I'm not making a living off of this, or how come I have to work full time or whatever. Yeah. And so it's important to just like keep that all in perspective and be like, oh no, it's actually really hard. It's hard to be a human.
No, I love that you said that. And I think that's so important as well. And I've said this before in other conversations, but I would not have been able to do my job, much less write anything, for the last 2 years of the pandemic if my parents had not lived 20 minutes away and helped with childcare. Like, I don't know how people are doing it. And if anyone is managing to write on top of their job during a pandemic with no help,
good Lord.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like daycare. I actually, in my next book, which I wrote during the pandemic, in my acknowledgments, there is just a line that says like, thank you, daycare, because I would not have been able to do anything. And like, exactly, like parents, whoever your village is, like that's important. And if you don't have a village, guess what? You can't do nearly as much as people who do.
Exactly. And that is okay, because I feel like there's things change too. You know, like if my parents aren't able to help at some point, my productivity is going to go down.
And that's okay.
And that's
right?
Okay.
Right. Like sometimes we're so hard on ourselves. I think we forget it's okay if circumstances change. Like it's okay if you were able to write a book in a year or two, but your next book takes you 10 years, right? Because things are different then, or because it's a global pandemic that's got no end in sight or whatever. No big deal.
Exactly. It's all okay. Right.
Yes. I think if we can just say that to ourselves more, say that to our kids more. Like I try to tell Maya all the time, like it's okay. Don't worry about it. Like you broke your toy. You know what? It's okay. We'll either fix it or we'll find a new toy we love. Like it's okay. Let's just take a breath and it'll all be all right.
Exactly. Tell me a little bit more as we're coming to a close about Maya and about the lessons you've learned through writing and through motherhood that you want her to take with her as a young woman as she grows up into a teen and an adult.
Oh, so I think the big thing that I want her to take is, I guess it's two things. So one is I really want her to be an empathetic person. So I want her to be the kind of person who tries to think about like, what could this person be going through, or what privileges do I have that this person may not have, or how can I be someone who uses what I have for good? And I just think that is so important, and we sometimes forget about that, and that there's this like pressure to succeed, and it's like, and sometimes we get so stuck in the idea of succeeding that we don't want to like extend a hand to other people. But I think extending that hand is like the most important thing we can do. And so I want her to be that person who is like, yeah, like her friends feel like they can come to her and talk to her. But I also want her to have a really strong sense of herself, right? So I don't want her to become so consumed with other people that she now is a people pleaser and all of a sudden she can't stop thinking about other people. Like I want her to know who she is and be confident in that, and really like fight for the things that she believes in, even if it's against me, right? Like I'm going to be wrong. And I want her to tell me that. And I want her to feel comfortable saying like, mom, that sucked and I didn't like it. And here's why. And I will have to swallow my pride and listen to it, because I think that girls especially just get told that they have to take care of everyone else ahead of themselves. So I think there's like, I want her to have this balance, this beautiful, like the relationship between caring about others and making sure that she cares for herself. And I don't ever want the scales to tip too far in one direction. And I hope that she's able to kind of maintain that like steadiness. And my husband's a Libra, which is very balanced. So I hope that she gets that from him, because I know I'm all over the place.
Well, you like you said, you have lots of emotions, which is a good thing and serves you well, I think, and will serve Maya well too.
I like to think so.
I think so. Thank you so much, Crystal. I wish we had more and more time to
I know.
talk.
I could talk to you all day.
Me too. Well, you have a new book coming out soon, so maybe come back when that one. Tell us briefly about your new forthcoming book.
So my next book is called No Filter and Other Lies. And so this is a book that also has a fat brown girl at its center, but it's this story about social media and lying, and like, what does it look like when you get so consumed with accepting of or getting the acceptance of other people that you're willing to lie in order to feel good about yourself. So we follow this character of Kat, and she is like, she so badly, she wants to be thin and white and just be that person that everyone on Instagram loves, but she's not. And she's living this life that feels very unglamorous. And in her desperation for that acceptance, she decides she's going to go rogue, and she's going to make this fake online account, and she's going to catfish people and be this whole other person. And so we watch as she's like got these dual identities. And so in the one hand, she's living this glamorous life, but it's all fake. And she's got to grapple with that and deal with complicated families and complicated feelings. And so this is a book that I think does get into like the ugly side of social media, but then really talks about the importance of really appreciating who you are and finding your people and realizing that you're pretty great exactly as you are. So Kat and Charlie have that message in common, at least.
I think it's a good message to teens and to writer mother monsters as well. You're pretty great.
We need it too, right? Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. Please come back.
I would love to. Please. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Crystal. We'll see you again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Bye.
Bye. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show and the conversation as much as I did. We're taking a quick break for the holidays, but join us back in January for more Writer Mother Monster. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider becoming a patron or patroness to help me keep it going. You can find information at writermothermonster.com. And I'll see you all after the break. Happy holidays.